Okay, this video is going to be about the person who's considered to be the father of Ashkenazic Jewry, and that is somebody by the name of Rabbeinu Gershom. His full name is Rav Gershom ben Yehuda, and you can see the dates of his life, the 960 to the year 1030. Rabbeinu Gershom, again, is considered to be the father of Ashkenazic Jewry. As hopefully we know at this point, what that means is that he was the first big rabbi to settle in what became the world of Ashkenaz. He ultimately settles in the city of Mainz, and he lived there. It's one of the cities on the Rhineland. If you remember, there's spires, worms, and mines, and he lived in one of those, and he lived there his whole life. The most famous thing that Rabbeinu Gershom is known for are what are known as his takanot. If you see this word over here, he's known for his takanot, and what they basically were, they were decrees that he issued upon the Jews in the world of Ashkenaz. They were meant to be temporary at first. We'll talk about why in a second. The general reason is because he was trying to protect the Jews from the wrath, from the anger of the Christians. So he instituted a whole bunch of decrees in order to protect the Jews from the Christians. Ultimately, what happened is they became, as they kind of extended on, they were only meant to be at first applicable for about 200 years, but as it became kind of a habit or hobby, or it just became so accepted that for sure by Ashkenazic Jewry across the world, including today, it became official. And we still hold by a number of these decrees, these takanot today. They became really ingrained into our system. So there's really a couple of the most famous ones. We're going to talk about all of these here on the page. The most famous thing that he does that is very much relevant to the time period is, number one here, the ban against polygamy. Polygamy is a man marrying more than one wife. You can see the picture down over here. And Rabbeinu Gershom basically explains what he basically decreed, what he basically issued upon the Ashkenazic Jewish community is that they're only allowed, it had been a custom up until that point, or a hobby, that men would marry more than one wife, 1, 2, 3, 4, 10. As many, really, there was no limit on them necessarily. As we know, there were many figures in the Torah, Yaakov, and the Tanakh, Shlomo HaMelech, David. There's plenty of people who married more than one wife. The reason for it here is because the Rabbeinu Gershom understood that the Jews were living in a society in which the Christians hated them. And the ideal in the world of Christianity, what Christianity saw as the ideal, was celibacy, was no marriage, no sexual relations, none of it. And what Rabbeinu Gershom thought is that if the Christians see that Jews marrying more than one wife, that means multiple marriages, multiple sexual relationships, that would give the Christians even more reason to hate the Jews. And I wrote here to prevent licentiousness. Licentiousness is just I guess putting themselves out there too much from a sexual perspective. And it was really to protect the Jews' dignity, that they shouldn't be seen as disgusting. And I guess the other idea here is that because Christianity was so against marriage as an ideal, if they got married, it was like a b'diavad. It was like in the last case scenario, it was okay. But if the Christians already saw marriage as disgusting, and they tolerated one marriage because, okay, whatever, you marry one person, okay, but polygamy, for a man to have more than one wife, would be considered to be disgusting, and it would give the Christians even more reason to hate the Jews. So what Rabbeinu Gershom does is he basically decrees, he issues a takana, I should say, which is a better word. A decree is a little bit of a strong word. An enactment, a rule, let's call it a rule, that in Ashkenazic Jewish society, they were not allowed to marry more than one woman. The issue that created, so that was number one. Okay, that's the first takana that we're going to talk about. There was an issue that was created by this takana, by this rule. And the issue that was created was that men in those days were so used to marrying more than one wife. And, sons had seen their fathers, grow up, and when they grow up, they saw their fathers marry many, many women. And there was a concern on the part of Rabbeinu Gershom that some men would have a very hard time only marrying one woman. And what they would do is they would marry a woman, get sick of her, divorce her. Marry a woman, get sick of her, divorce her. Marry a woman, get sick of her, divorce her. So Rabbeinu Gershom, at basically around the same time that he institutes this rule that you can't marry more than one woman, he also institutes a rule in order to protect women. And the rule that he institutes is what you see here, number 2, that a woman cannot be divorced against her will. That unless there's a rare exception of a case that a woman is walking around and being, let's say, a prostitute, other than a case like that, a man, for unless the woman consents to divorce, he was not allowed to divorce her. And the reason for this was really to kind of prevent men from thinking that it was okay to just keep marrying women and then divorcing them. So those are the first two. Those are the first two takanot. Probably the most famous. The other really famous one is what you see here, number 3, which is that it's forbidden to open letters addressed to others. And this is a very well-known thing, that you're not allowed to open somebody's mail. You're not allowed to open. It probably even extends to email. You're not allowed to open other people's letters. To this day, a lot of our mail in the United States still goes to my parents' house. My mother will not open a letter unless she has my permission. And the reason for this, we don't know exactly. It's not as timely, let's say, as the other two are. There's definitely elements here that Rabbeinu Gershom was trying to prevent as much chilul Hashem as possible. He's trying to prevent as much Jews looking bad, meaning if, God forbid, a Christian found a Jew opening a Christian's letter, or even they saw a Jew opening a Jew's letter, it would make them think badly, even worse than they did about Jews, and there's definitely an element about that here. There's other possible opinions that are given as to why Rabbeinu Gershom instituted this. One is because we don't want, like, if let's say something is written there about another person, that is meant to be a secret, and if a person reads it, it's like revealing gossip. It's rechilos. It's close to lashon hara, but it's more rechilos, and that would be one reason for the prohibition, right? That, if there's something about another person, it was meant and it was thrown into the garbage, let's say, or it was not meant to be seen. Actually, the garbage is a separate issue, but it was not meant to be seen. Then by reading the letter, they're revealing that secret to themselves, and that could obviously cause a chain effect and have them reveal it to other people. Another opinion why one may not be able to open somebody else's mail. So just so far we have that there's probably a timely issue. Again, it was in order to protect the Jews from looking bad against the Christians. Number 2, that you may be revealing gossip. That would be a prohibition of rechilos. Okay, and then another opinion is that it's basically stealing, right? That you're taking something, you're looking at something that doesn't belong to you, and that would basically make you a thief, and that would be another reason. So again, it's a timely thing. There's a lashon hara rechilos issue. There's a stealing issue, and then another opinion is that it's very simple. It's v'ahavta l'recha kamocha. You would never want somebody else to open your mail. Therefore, you would never open anybody else's mail. While we're talking about this, I'll just spend a couple of minutes talking about other applications, other halachic applications that this may apply to. So one of them is actually the issue of email, and although there's definitely a difference between a letter and an email, or even a voicemail, it's very possible that this takana of Rabbeinu Gershom applies to these items as well. Therefore, you should not look at anybody else's email by opening their email or listen to somebody else's voicemail. And I would even probably argue that it extends to people's text messages, to people's Snapchats, to things like that. What belongs to a person is meant to stay belonging to that person, and it's probably, aside from even Rabbeinu Gershom, it's probably just not right. It's probably just not nice to listen to somebody else's messages. Obviously, unless you have their explicit permission, it would probably not necessarily be okay. There's a lot of other interesting applications, but we'll stick to that right now. Probably one other thing to mention is other people's phone calls, that tapping into someone else's phone call, like putting a bug on their phone just for the sake of gossiping, is probably violation of this takana of Rabbeinu Gershom. Trying to listen, if someone, let's say, is sitting in a room with a closed door, and they obviously want privacy, to sit and keep your ear to the door is probably not okay. A lot of this is obviously common sense, because it's not nice. It's like a little yucky. Again, these are interesting things that were enacted in around the year 1000, maybe even a little bit later, and very much still apply today. The last takana of Rabbeinu Gershom, which is number 4, which we'll talk about here, is the right of apostate Jews to return to Judaism. So basically, what this is as follows: the Jews, as we've started to understand, lived a pretty bad life under the Christians. And there were some Jews, not a ton at this point, but there were some Jews who decided that it would be a lot easier for themselves just to convert to Christianity. They would save themselves a lot of pain, a lot of anguish. They would be able to live on the feudal system, right? They'd be able to live in a lot more of a pleasant society if they just were Christian. And there were a number of Jews who became Christian. But what happened in a lot of cases is that as those Jews got older, and I guess maybe as some of them were sitting on their deathbed and they're reflecting on their life, they regretted it. They regretted the fact that they quote unquote converted to Christianity. And a lot of those Jews, not only on their deathbeds, but those at other points in life, really wanted to come back to Judaism. And there were a number of Jews who said, no, you left us here out to dry. We suffered while you lived a good life as a Christian. No way, you can't come back to Judaism. So one of the other things that Rabbeinu Gershom and then Rashi after him instituted is that any time a Jew, regardless of how much he turned his back on the Jewish people, anytime he wants to come back to Judaism, he is very much allowed to. So just to review, okay, so you have, we talked about Rabbeinu Gershom as the father of Ashkenazic Jewry. We talked about the fact that he's most known for these takanot, these rules that he instituted, some of them being not being allowed to marry more than one wife, and not allowing a woman to be divorced against her will, not opening other people's mail and other extensions as well as the right of apostate Jews, of Jews who leave Judaism, the right of those Jews to return to Judaism. The next part of this unit is Rashi, and we'll pick this up in the next video.